Welcome to episode 8 of the Formidable Genealogist Studio. My name is Jen, and if you've seen most of my content online, it's typically been the short form reels of tips, but I am trying a little foray into longer content, and it gives me an opportunity to talk to some of my favorite people that I've met at genealogy conferences, and one of them's here. This is Jennifer Dunn, and she is the owner of Copper Mine Genealogy based in Georgia. And we're going to talk a little bit about why Southern research is so hard. So, Jennifer, do you want to talk a little bit about your background and your business and what you do so people get a feel for you before we dig in?
Sure, I would love to. I'm Jennifer Dunn. I was born here in North Georgia, born and raised. I have a degree in history. Always loved history. That led to genealogy. I started when I was about 14, which I think a lot of us do. We get kind of that time when we're a teenager and we're about to find our hobby, and that was my hobby that I found. And of course, it is now turned into a many years later business. And so since I'm from the South, my whole family's from the South. All eight, great grandparents are from the South. So I didn't realize this at the time, but I was forged in the fires of genealogy because Southern research is very hard. I didn't realize that because I didn't have any Massachusetts ancestors to look up. I didn't have anybody out in the Midwest where maybe their death certificates started in the 1880s. All my family was in the South. So I really did kind of learn. I always say that the South is genealogy on hard mode, and I really learned on hard mode.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, so I get this question all the time. I am by no means an expert in Southern research. I did do an IGHR Institute course last year with, I think, Mark Lowe and Kelvin Myers taught that one. So I'm working on it. But I want you to tell me from your vantage point of so many generations and so much research, why is Southern research so hard?
Well, I do want to first say that if you do have a Southern genealogy question, go to Mark Lowe first. If you can't get to Mark Lowe because you're very busy, then come to me. But go to Mark first if you have the chance. He
Yeah.
is pretty much my genealogy hero, and he knows this because I tell him. So this is not anything new to him. But oh my gosh, there's so many reasons. So first of all, I've mentioned vital records. In the South, vital records, birth certificates, death certificates, often didn't start until the early 1900s. Like in Georgia, it was the 1910s. And a lot of times they weren't even really followed until the 1940s, World War II. Like I have at least two women, one related to me, one for a client, where me and the vital records office, we did everything we could to find a death certificate. They both died in like 1942, 1941. Neither one of those old women who lived in a rural area had a death certificate. And I think they just, why are we going to tell the county our business? We're going to bury grandma at the church and we're all set. So that's one thing you have to think of. No vital records. And then our substitutes that we love, like, your baptism records, if you're Catholic or anything like that. Not in the South, because mostly, of course, we have Catholics here. The South is not a monolith. But mostly the South, it's a nonconformist religions like Baptist, Methodist, Presbyterian. They don't baptize at birth, so there's not going to be a baptism record. And that's just and the same thing. On that same note, if even if the records do exist, a lot of times the courthouses have been burned, or things have been eaten by bugs, or flooding, or just because of the South. If you think about it, we're a hot and humid place. We have
Mhm.
hurricanes and tornadoes. I find courthouses destroyed by different things all the time. It's like, oh, it was destroyed in a tornado. Oh no, that's horrible. So you have to think about that. We've lost a lot of our records. So even if there were some sort of attempts, maybe by cities or counties, to do earlier vital records, even as early as the 1700s. But those often were not very much adopted. And if they were, maybe they got lost in all these different disasters. And of course, I should mention the Civil War. Were burned during the Civil War. We kind of brought that on ourselves, unfortunately.
Right. So when you are starting to research a spot in the South and you're wondering about what records exist, what record loss might be present, um, what's your go-to way of figuring that out? What would you recommend people do first to figure out what they can even work with?
Oh, absolutely. So you definitely need to research your county that you're looking at, but really, it's not even the county, it's the region that you need to look at. Because I think one thing too, Southerners were mobile. We often think, well, my ancestor, they were a farmer and so and so. And, maybe if they were rich, or maybe if they, had landowning tradition there, but a lot of people were way more mobile than we thought. Like maybe even if they did have that farm in Lawrence County, Georgia, they're probably doing business all over the region. So you would want to look up that whole region and kind of see what records are there, what are not. Another interesting thing about the South is that, our counties boundaries change a lot. So,
Yeah.
and even our state boundaries change a lot. If you're trying to do research in upcountry South Carolina, say in the late 1700s, early 1800s, which I'm doing right now, I have had to make this just most fantastic chart for the client showing, okay, where he lived on Kings Creek, it's now Cherokee County, North or South Carolina, was York County, it was North Carolina, it was this other place in North Carolina. So you have to think about that. So that's the first thing you really need to do is nail down that geography and where they lived and find exactly where they lived if you can, like a creek or a landlocked number if you're here in Georgia, and make sure you understand what records are even there. And the second thing too, not everything is online, which I'm sure, Jen, you say this all the time, but
Yeah.
it's so true. So if you can, of course, often we can't, you want to travel there and just see what they have. So I was Bartow County, Georgia, not that long ago, and I didn't have long. I was meeting somebody for lunch, and I was like, you know what? I'm early. Let me run in and look up this one record I've been wanting to look up in Bartow County at the probate court. And of course, I'm looking around, see what else we have, and snapping pictures. And there's the pistol toters handbooks, and I'm like, what are the pistol toters? I think handbooks is what they were called, or registries, something like that. I'm like, what are those? I did not have a chance to look at them. They were kind of high on a shelf. I would have had to get help, to get them
Yeah.
down. So now I've got to go back and look at the pistol toter registry. And I imagine they were, like the movie Tombstone, where they're having to
Yeah.
turn in their pistol when they go into town. I was like, is it something like that? Like they had to register that they had a pistol? I don't know. And so, what an exciting thing to find. And so that's the
Uh,
South is full of surprises.
yeah, because we're so used to knowing exactly what things mean. It's not often that we're surprised with something like that we just have no idea. That's awesome. So I typically tell people to use Family Search Research Wiki to try to get that overview of a county, just to see if there's a date listed for the county courthouse burning or flooding or what have you. Do you have any other resources that you go to for things like that?
Yes, so I usually make a locality guide. If not a full locality guide, like my full locality guides can be 30, 50 pages. They can be insane. But if I'm working for a client, I'm trying to do something. I'm not charging my client if I'm making them a little short locality guide. So it's my own time. So I need to be kind of quick. But so
Can
I'll
you
do that.
elaborate on what a locality guide is that you make?
Oh, sure. Yeah. So a locality guide is just sort of your cheat sheet for the area. Usually I make mine based on county. So it'll include like when vital records started. It'll include, when land records started or what's available, land records, probate, a short history of the county. I also include population through the years so I can kind of understand why, because we'll notice counties, they drain out and they empty or they suddenly have a big population influx. And that's important to me to know because a lot of times I'm dealing with migration patterns and things too. It'll also include, let's see, like when tax records are available, important laws. So maybe, important tax laws, important probate laws for the state, if it's a state I'm not accustomed to. So yeah, it's just kind of like your cheat sheet for the county. And I always tell people the first one you make is just it's going to be so hard and you're going to be like, oh, why am I doing this? But then the second time you use it, that's when the love of your locality guide is going to shine through because then you're just like probate right here. These are the three things I need to check. Taxes, I need to check these three things. And it makes your life so much easier. That is one of my top hacks for genealogy.
So smart. I don't do that. So that's awesome that you do that.
Well, you would
Anyway,
love to have them your second time.
yeah, I derailed you with where you were going with other resources.
What was I saying? Oh yeah. Oh, so I
Yeah.
also look at things like the old Roots Web or GenWeb websites. Those are amazing. I mean, people
Mhm.
put so much on there. Now, of course, it can be old fashioned. I've even seen old fashioned language used on there that we wouldn't use anymore because they're so old, like from the 80s, from the
Yeah.
90s. Yeah. And so like, oh, okay. But they have such good stuff. Like for Forsyth County, Georgia, for example. In Georgia, we don't keep marriage applications generally. But in Forsyth County, Georgia, randomly had a few marriage applications, and somebody had went through and a couple hundred marriage applications and transcribed them. And the only place I've ever found those, besides going to the courthouse, is on that one Roots Web website. So I would definitely use that. A lot of people are using AI now for locality guides. I'm a conservative AI person. Some people are way more cutting edge than I am. But yeah, you could definitely use AI because they can find stuff that you may not find. And you can even tell it, hey, find me things that may not be a little, I can't even think of the word, easy to find. And then another
Right.
thing I use is the state encyclopedias. So there's the New Georgia Encyclopedia, the Arkansas Encyclopedia, and a lot of times they have an entry on the state and it will, excuse me, the county, the locality, It might even be the
Hmm.
region in the state, and it'll tell you kind of, the important historical highlights of that area. So that can just be a quick way to do that. And those are written by historians and college professors and people like that in the county. So that can really, I love genealogists, but some of the older stuff we find can be very biased or can be very, amateur because a lot of us are amateurs and there's nothing wrong with that. History is built on amateurs going out there and doing interviews and things like that. But, if you can get that one that's written by the historian, you can really just, it's a big shortcut for you.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, and that highlights another great point. We're not all experts at the same thing. We can't possibly know everything.
Oh,
I sometimes get inquiries from people that are like, okay, I really want you to research my French ancestors. And I'm like, well, I don't speak French, so let me refer you to somebody else that does. And there's a lot of misconception about, not everybody has the same specialty, and not all of the same records will exist across time. Not everything exists, period.
yeah.
Um, so what are your specialties besides Georgia? Are there other ones too?
Yeah, I say that my specialty is poor and hard to find Southern ancestors. So I'll get you throughout the Southeast and even some of the maybe not so Southeast areas like Arkansas and Texas and Missouri that our Southeastern ancestors, they moseyed on to after a while. Yeah, and I just love because when I was in college, I did a lot of work on like economics, labor relations, things like that. So I'm very interested in sort of the I say that our ancestors were motivated by three things: money, love, or danger. And 99% of that was money. And
Yeah.
it's just,
Yeah.
love or danger, yeah, that's important. But people were looking for a better life for their kids. And that will often include migrating and involve taking jobs, maybe dangerous jobs. And so to me, I think that's very interesting, kind of following the money and following the opportunities for our ancestors.
Hmm. So, in your experience researching across the South, and this is going to be like a very generalized question, but just off the top of your head, which are the three most difficult states to research and why?
Oh God,
Just,
Alabama.
pick a time period for your reference, but like what jumps to mind as the number one most difficult and why?
Alabama. I don't know. Every county I need in Alabama is a burned county, and I don't know how that happens. I mean, well, if you look at
Yeah.
their burned county map, a lot of them are burned. So that's part of it. Yeah, I
Do
just
you
find
know of
Alabama hard.
a burned county map that people could pull up?
No, Google it. I don't think I have
Just Google
one.
that. Okay.
Yeah, I think just Google it. But yeah, there's a Bern County map. I saw it. It might have even been on a Legacy Family Tree webinars presentation where I was like, wow, that's a lot of Bern counties. No wonder. Second for me is South Carolina because South Carolina has wonderful records. They have great court records and things like that, except for they did not require civil marriage registration until the 20th century. So no marriage records. It's so hard. Sometimes you can find substitutes in probate records or whatever, but it's not going to have her maiden name. There's no
Mhm.
bondsman, and it's just, oh, it's so difficult. And then, I mean, okay, this is not quite the South, but so many Southerners went there that I'm going to count it. It's Texas. It's just because Georgia has 159 counties. We're the second most in the country, but Texas has 232 or something like that. A Texan can correct me. It's somewhere in there though. And it's just so interesting. It's such a new state. There's so much, like every time I'm trying to look up the history of a county in Texas, it's so long just because Texans are proud. It's very well documented, but it's always like there was this Native American massacre and then this happened and then this mill burned and this. And I'm like, oh my goodness, Texas, you guys are so proud. It's almost like I have too much information to
Yeah.
convey to my client. So those are my three. Now somebody else might say Georgia.
Right.
And I
Yeah,
don't
I mean,
blame
it all depends on what you're looking for, but I was just interested in like your first response on
you.
that.
Yeah, that's a good
Um,
question. Nobody's ever asked
yeah.
me that.
And so let's clarify and define something that you mentioned. You talked about substitutes. For anybody that's not familiar with, research beyond, like what am I trying to say? Where the name of a record represents exactly what it is, like a vital record or a census record. Can you elaborate on substitutes and give some examples?
Yes, for sure. So one thing we were just talking about is so there's no marriage record in South Carolina. So we might find a wife's name before 1850 in, say, a land record where she gave up her dower rights, or we might find it in a probate record. Her husband dies and then or a will, and he leaves it to, his wife Mary or Anna or whatever. So that would be a substitute for a marriage record. If she's his wife, then we're pretty sure they got married in there somewhere. Another thing might be for a census, a tax list. So say in Georgia, we don't have a census until 1820. Our early ones are missing. So, but there are early tax lists for a lot of our Eastern Georgia counties. So we can see, okay, well, I know this guy lived there. And of course, his name is usually John Smith, because that's another problem in the South. But, okay, John Smith and Benjamin Smith and all these brothers that I have followed from South Carolina, at least if there's no census, I can at least find them in the tax records. So that's just a couple of examples.
Okay. Um, for the final question here, for somebody that is just getting started researching in Georgia, what is what are some of the top things that you would recommend that they either consider or pursue in their own family history research?
For one, I would consider understanding how land is transferred in Georgia. This is incredibly important. And I think people are intimidated by land records. So they're like, yeah, I'll look at that later, or I'll never look at it. Georgia's very interesting. We had sort of three different methods of transferring land. I'm not going to go into all of it, but I think we are going to talk about land lotteries later, which is how most of Georgia was given away. But in Georgia, if you understand how the land lotteries worked, you can pinpoint your ancestor down to often like a 202 acre or a 40-acre farm or plot of land, and you really know exactly where they lived. And no other southern state has that. Some of the ones that are on the federal land system, they have that later. But in Georgia, in the early parts of Georgia, you can really pinpoint exactly where your ancestor lived if you understand how the land lottery system worked. So that would be my number one tip. And then second, it's just really, again, it's all about the land. So understand the county boundaries. A lot of Georgia was given away in large counties, and then those counties were immediately subdivided into smaller counties, just immediately. But a lot of the early records, you think that you're looking for records in Henry County, and oh no, no, I may be doing this wrong. But the original records might be in Early County, for example. And don't I may have gotten those two counties mistaken, but just use that as a general example. So
Right.
you definitely want to know, like your early records may be in a totally different county. It may not even be adjacent, but so you need to understand that. And I think those are really my top two those are kind of the two mistakes that I see people making. And then I
Mhm.
guess really the third one is understand those vital records, birth and death records are not available until the late 1910s. And so a lot of people ask me, why I couldn't find a birth certificate for my grandma. Well, when was she born? Well, 1880. Well, because it does
Yeah.
not exist.
Right. Yeah, I think that's one of the hardest things to wrap your head around when you first get started researching is that that type of record that you're looking for just simply will not exist. So,
Exactly.
unless you're lucky enough to find a church record somewhere, which is unusual. But
Very unusual.
anyway, thank you so much for giving me some insight here on how difficult Southern research is. And you are dynamite, and I love what you had to say.
Thank you so
Thanks so
much.
much. Yep. Bye.